Alright, so this has been a little topic I wanted to talk about. After a look at, well, I could say that I wanted to talk about this subject after, reading the preview. I got to actually read the preview for Daredevil #1 by Mark Waid, and I was actually surprised of who was in it. The Spot's going to be the villain for the first issue. Yeah, I know. When's the last time we saw the Spot? For those who don't know who the Spot is, don't worry. He's a very miscellaneous Marvel villain. He's a Spider-Man villain, but also like a Daredevil villain as well. What he can do is basically those spots on his body open up little wormholes. Now, if you ever played the game Portal, it's kind of like that, where his appendage of his body or someone else he can warp to ends up in another part. They kind of open up in mini pocket dimensions that can warp you to somewhere else or warp an appendage. Like, I remember one time where Spider-Man was fighting the Spot, and he went to punch him, and the hole in the Spot's chest opened up, and it came back out of the Spot's face and punched Spider-Man. His own fist came back and hit him in the face. So that's a really cool power, but the Spot's a really underused villain, in my opinion. And that's the thing I want to talk about. Underused villains in the Marvel Universe. Now, this is kind of akin to why I talk about the Marvel villains, because the DC villains seem like, as much as weird and strange they are, they get a lot of limelight. I mean, look at the Flash Rogues and the Secret Six are probably the two best examples. I mean, look at the Secret Six. Outside of Bane, people probably wouldn't know who the rest of the villains are. I mean, Bane didn't show up in the original Secret Six roster during Villains United. It was just a bunch of miscellaneous characters all put together. I mean, no one probably ever heard of Catman or Deadshot or Ragdoll and all them. So it was kind of cool to see six D-list supervillains, and now they're like regarded as one of the coolest, most badass super comic books out there. And my sister's making popcorn out there. Yeah. But here's the thing I wanted to talk about with Marvel. With Marvel, they don't really do a lot with their villains, other than the lesser class villains are more or less considered a joke, and they're kept as a running gag as a joke, which I find very, very foolish. I'm glad the Spot's going to be a villain in the first issue of Daredevil. I don't know if he's going to be like the overarching villain. I did read in the preview that there was going to be a new villain Daredevil was going to fight in Hell's Kitchen, which is cool. But I'm hoping the Spot remains like an underling. Over here, in case you're wondering who this is the Eel. The Eel's another lesser-known supervillain. I've got 3 other pictures of supervillains, because I just figure if I run out of time, I might as well tell you guys the other 3 villains you're going to see in order. In order, it's the Unicorn, Princess Python, the Texas Twister, and Porcupine. Don't worry, they're so miscellaneous. Probably most of you people who are even major Marvel fans probably have never heard of these people. It's okay. And that's the thing. I'd really like, because Marvel should really bring out these lesser class supervillains and superheroes, for that matter. I mean, look at, Secret Six is a good one. Why don't they do a book? And actually, they kind of did a book. 2 books, actually. They did a book in the past, during World War Hulk. They did a book called MODOK's 11, which MODOK and 11 other supervillains went off to pull off this big heist. And it was a lot of low-class, D-list supervillains. The Spot was one of them. There was a Captain America villain known as Nightshade. The Chameleon was part of it. It was all different supervillains. And then they kind of did it again with another supervillain book, but it was more B-list supervillains. This was Dark Reign Lethal Legion, which was a 3-part story involving the Grim Reaper leading the Mandrill, Absorbing Man, Mr. Hyde, and Necra. I think that was Necra. But yeah, it was kind of like that, and I really wish Marvel would put out... I know there's Thunderbolts, but that's technically like a superhero book now. I liked it when it was a supervillain... not a superhero... more of a supervillain book, kind of like it was in Dark Reign. I read the whole Andy Digley run throughout Dark Reign, the whole little strike force, and I really wish it would go back to being a villain book, because I didn't really care much for Thunderbolts now when Jeff Parker took control. Not dissing, of course, the characters in there. I just think I liked it better when it was considered a supervillain book. And I'd really like to see that again. In fact, my vision, if I ever get a hold of Thunderbolts, I would like to make it a villain book, but use a lot of D-list and C-list and D-list villains all working for Baron Zemo. That's what I would do. Make them like Baron Zemo's Hit Squad, something along those lines. You know, uh, that's something I would like to do, and it's really sad too because a lot of DC did this too a lot with their villains. They really make them like worthy threats, like once again the Flash villains. People always consider the Flash rogues, you know, as not really, they're all gimmicky and they're just really lame, and the Flash can just easily take them down. Go check out the Flash books. They're probably the most dangerous, some of the most dangerous rogues out there because they work together, they're teams, they know how to fight. Yeah, they're coordinated, and I really like them as a threat. Same goes for the Secret Six, and Marvel could really do something with their low class supervillains. But it's sad too because every time I see a D-list supervillain in a comic book, it's usually like they're either going to be killed off or never seen again. That's how it usually is when I see a lot of these superhero characters, especially when Fred Van Lente wrote his two god-awful Marvel Zombies books. We saw a lot of D-list superheroes and villains being turned into zombies or eaten or just killed off. And that kind of pissed me off, because every character I feel like has potential. Except when you're talking about Sentry. That character has no more potential. And the few other characters out there. Every character, unless some writer comes along and royally messes them up, has potential. That's a better word for it. So that's basically what I'm trying to get across in here. I mean, why can't Marvel just make a book about supervillains, a bunch of D-list supervillains, and no one can say, oh, well, that'd be copying DC. Trust me, Marvel and DC have been copying one another since ever. They always kind of like, in some way, aspects or another, Marvel and DC mimic one another, and I don't really think it's on. I don't really think sometimes it's unintentional. Sometimes it's like a gag at some points, but it's kind of a thing. So I'd like to see Marvel put out a book basically involving a small group of supervillains, of incredibly lesser known villains, and trying to make them awesome. But it would have to take the right writer for it. I don't know who I'd get on that, but I definitely maybe Greg Pak. Greg Pak has a good feel for characters, or maybe I'd get Digley on here. Andy Digley on there. I'd put him on that book because he likes supervillains. He doesn't care much for superheroes. Or maybe even Warren Ellis. I'm sorry if I sound like I'm stretching here. I am. It's because my back's kind of stiff. So sorry about that if you can hear me like stretching. I am because my back is just really stiff. I've just been lying down for about 3 hours straight. So yeah, sorry for that minor inconvenience. But really, all in all, I've just got to say that I'd really like to see Marvel put out a book, or at least bring out some more of their villains. I really wish they'd bring out more of their villains. Or something like that. I mean, at least bring them out in different books. I mean, look at, like I said, like going back to the Spot in Daredevil. Put different villains and make them major again, like Mr. Fear was. Remember back in Daredevil during the Ed Brubaker run? For those who read it, remember how much of a joke Mr. Fear was before that story, the Hell to Pay story. Mr. Fear was scary again. So why not make some villains? Why not make them? More intimidating. Put them in books. Like, I'd really like to see a story. In fact, I'd really like to see somebody like the Unicorn. That Unicorn was, which a picture you saw earlier in this video, was an Iron Man villain. I'd really like to see him come back and become a major Iron Man villain. Tongue-tied. I'd like to see him become a major Iron Man villain like he was back in the 70s when he was first introduced. Because back then, the Unicorn, as much of a joke as he was now, he was actually a really dangerous Iron Man foe. I mean, he came close to killing him 3 times in the old classic Iron Man books. So I'd really like to see, put them in make a villain team book with all these characters and put them in a mini series and see if people like it. Then bring out an ongoing series. Because I deep down, people really do like these miscellaneous characters and how they're reused or redone and all that. I guarantee you this would probably be a smash hit with Marvel of them, or bring them out in different books. I'd really like to see a lot of these supervillains become major villains to their characters again, or at least used differently. But yeah, I think I've pretty much said my piece on this whole video. You guys tell me, what do you guys think of supervillains? Miscellaneous supervillains like D-list and C-list villains being reused as characters. How would you want to see them redone or remade? And would you make them a little more darker or grittier? And would you like to see them in their own book, or do you want to see them take on superheroes and make them major villains again, like Mr. Fear was remade into a real threat again? So comment below. You guys tell me. I'm really interested because as always, I can't be the only one thinking about stuff like this. Marvel has so many villains that are considered jokes now, or people haven't even heard of. For the new Marvel readers, this would probably be a good way to bring in new Marvel readers, with bringing in these classic characters and remaking them. That'd be a really good idea. But as always, you guys tell me below, and let me know what you think, or even video response if you want to. I'm out.